Some women are invited to a gala to be admired, and some are invited just to be humiliated. Claire Whitman heard the words before she saw the black envelope slide across her desk. The glossy paper stopped beside her coffee cup with almost surgical precision. Around her, keyboard slowed. Conversations faded. Half the marketing floor of Meridian Tower suddenly became very interested in pretending not to stare. Margaret Sloan leaned one manicured hand against Claire's cubicle wall and smiled the way rich women smiled right before they destroyed someone politely. "You should feel honored," she said smoothly. "The Whitmore Winter Gala only invites people who matter." A few quiet chuckles floated across the office. Claire kept her eyes on the envelope. Thick black cardstock, silver lettering, heavy enough to feel expensive. Too expensive for someone like her. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan shimmered under freezing December rain. The city looked beautiful from the 38th floor. Beautiful and impossibly far away from her real life. Claire tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear and forced herself to smile politely. "Thank you," she said. Margaret's expression sharpened slightly. Almost disappointed Claire had not reacted with panic. "Don't thank me yet," Margaret replied. "The gala has a formal dress code. Actual couture. Not whatever Pinterest miracle you usually manage." More laughter. Softer this time. Meaner. Claire felt heat crawl up her neck, but she refused to let it reach her face. She had learned that lesson her first month at Cole Meridian Group. Never let them see embarrassment. Embarrassment was entertainment to people like Margaret Sloan. "I'll figure something out," Claire said quietly. Margaret tilted her head. "That's exactly what worries me." Then she walked away in heels that probably cost more than Claire's monthly rent. The office slowly returned to life. Screens glowed again. Phones hung. Someone coughed awkwardly near the printer. Claire stared at the invitation in silence. The Whitmore Winter Gala, the biggest charity event in New York's corporate world. Billionaires, politicians, cameras, crystal chandeliers, women who wore diamonds like they were born in them. She did not belong there. Everyone in this office knew it. That was the point. Claire reached for her coffee, only to realize it had gone cold almost an hour ago. Her reflection flickered faintly against the dark office window beside her. Cream sweater from a clearance rack. Tiny loose thread near the wrist. Blonde hair twisted into a rushed bun. Exhaustion hidden under concealer she bought at CVS during a buy-one-get-one sale. 27 years old, working 60-hour weeks for a woman who stole her ideas and called it mentorship. Her phone buzzed softly beside the keyboard. "MOM, don't forget your appointment tomorrow. And sweetheart, don't stress about Christmas gifts this year." Claire swallowed hard. The reminder sat in her chest heavier than the black envelope. Hospital bills. Rent due in 11 days. Her mother's medication. The tiny apartment in Queens with the heater that worked only when it felt generous. She cannot afford pride. That was the ugly truth about survival in New York. Pride was a luxury item. Claire opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a silver invitation card embossed with elegant lettering. Her name had been added beneath Margaret Sloan's. Guest. Not employee. Not assistant. Guest. Another joke. Another performance. Claire almost laughed. Instead, she slipped the card back inside and returned to her screen. A campaign presentation waited unfinished. Margaret's presentation. Claire's work. Same story as always. 40 minutes later, the office emptied floor by floor until only scattered lights remained across the massive open workspace. Rain tapped gently against the glass while the city below dissolved into gold and silver reflections. Claire rubbed her tired eyes and reached for the final proposal file. Her fingers paused suddenly when she noticed movement near the executive hallway. A man stepped into the dim office, carrying a charcoal overcoat over one arm. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair slightly damp from the rain outside. He loosened his tie as he walked, scanning the darkened floor like someone searching for a specific answer. Claire looked away quickly. Probably another executive. Another rich man living on black coffee and control. "You're still here." The voice caught her off guard. Deep, calm, much closer than expected. Claire looked up. The man stood beside her desk now, one hand resting lightly against the cubicle edge. Up close, he looked older than she first thought. Early 30s maybe. Tired eyes. Expensive watch. The kind of presence that made people straighten unconsciously. "Someone has to finish the campaign before tomorrow," Claire replied. He glanced toward the glowing presentation on her screen. Margaret Sloane's charity strategy. Claire gave a small, dry laugh before she could stop herself. "That depends who's asking." One corner of his mouth moved slightly, almost amused. "Fair enough." Silence settled between them for a moment while rain streaked down the windows behind him. Then his eyes returned to the presentation. "Do you think it's good?" Claire blinked. Nobody in this building asked what she thought. They only asked her to fix things quietly. "Honestly?" she asked carefully. "Honestly." She hesitated. Then something inside her snapped loose after the humiliation earlier that evening. Maybe exhaustion did that to people. Maybe loneliness did. "I think it looks beautiful," Claire admitted softly. "But I also think it says absolutely nothing." The man studied her face without interrupting. Claire exhaled slowly and glanced back toward the glowing Gala logo on her monitor. "Rich people love throwing charity events where nobody actually feels human," she continued quietly. "Everything's crystal glasses and photographers and speeches about changing lives while the people who need help can't even afford subway fare." The stranger remained silent. Claire shrugged awkwardly. "Saw the long day." But the man did not leave. Instead, he looked at her with sudden sharp interest, like she had just said something nobody around him had dared say in years. And for the first time all night, Claire felt seen. Claire barely slept that night. The rain followed her all the way back to Queens, sliding across subway windows in silver streaks, while exhausted strangers leaned against each other beneath flickering fluorescent lights. She sat near the back of the train, clutching her tote bag against her lap, replaying the conversation with the stranger from the office over and over in her mind. Rich people love throwing charity events where nobody actually feels human. She could not believe she had actually said that out loud, to a man who clearly belonged in that world. Brilliant Claire, she thought bitterly. Insult wealthy executives while working unpaid overtime. Exactly how careers are built. The train screeched into Roosevelt Avenue just after midnight. By the time she climbed the cracked apartment stairs to Unit 4B, her feet ached and the November wind had frozen straight through her coat. The hallway smelled faintly of old radiator heat and someone's burnt microwave dinner. Home, sort of. Claire unlocked the door quietly. The apartment was tiny. One bedroom converted into two spaces with a cream-colored curtain divider. A second-hand couch. A thrift store coffee table with uneven legs. Soft yellow kitchen light left on for her. "Claire," her mother called weakly from behind the curtain. Claire immediately softened. "I'm home, Mom." She slipped off her shoes and crossed the apartment quickly. Diane Whitman sat propped against pillows with a blanket over her legs, reading glasses low on her nose and a half-finished crossword puzzle resting in her lap. Cancer had made her smaller somehow. Not fragile exactly, just quieter. Claire hated that part most. Her mother used to fill rooms without trying. "You are late again," Diane murmured gently. Claire smiled tiredly. Margaret discovered the joy of assigning 6 hours of work at 5:30. Her mother gave a knowing look. "That woman does not deserve you." Claire busied herself pouring water into a glass, because hearing those words hurt more than hearing insults at work. "Maybe," she said lightly, "but she signs my paycheck." Diane watched her carefully. "You used to sketch when you came home stressed." Claire froze for half a second. Then she opened the kitchen drawer too quickly. "I do not really have time anymore." That was not entirely true. The sketchbook still existed, hidden beneath sweaters inside her closet like evidence from another life. Claire had once wanted to become a fashion designer. Not famous necessarily, just good enough to matter. Good enough to create something beautiful people remembered. Back before hospital bills replaced dreams. Back before survival became the only career plan available. After her mother finally fell asleep, Claire changed into sweatpants and quietly opened the closet anyway. Her fingers found the old leather sketchbook beneath folded winter clothes. Worn edges. Coffee stains. Pencil marks pressed deep into the cover from years of anxious hands. She sat cross-legged beside her bed and slowly opened it. Dresses. Dozens of them. Elegant silhouettes. Sharp necklines. Winter fabrics sketched in silver and charcoal. Pieces she imagined women wearing while stepping into rooms that underestimated them. Claire stopped at one page, near the middle. A gown drawn in soft white pencil with silver detailing flowing down one side, like liquid light. Clean, powerful, unapologetic. She remembered sketching it at 21 during a lecture she eventually stopped attending because tuition became impossible. Her phone buzzed suddenly beside her. Email notification. Margaret Sloan. Claire almost ignored it before finally opening the message. Reminder, gala attendance is mandatory. Presentation support begins at 6:30 sharp. Please arrive polished. Claire stared at the final word for several seconds. Polished, like she was a pair of shoes. Another message appeared underneath before she could lock the screen. Also, Claire, do not embarrass me. Her stomach tightened. She closed the phone immediately and leaned back against the wall. Outside, a siren echoed somewhere down the street while cold wind rattled the old windows. For a moment, exhaustion hit her so hard she wanted to cry. Instead, she looked down at the sketchbook again, at the white silver gown staring back up at her from the page. Something about it felt unfinished. Waiting. The next morning, Manhattan looked like steel beneath a pale gray sky. Claire arrived at Meridian Tower balancing coffee in one hand and presentation folders in the other while rushing through the revolving doors. The lobby gleamed, with marble and gold accents that always made her feel like an intruder. She was halfway toward the elevators when she heard someone say her name. Miss Whitman. Claire turned. The same man from last night stood near the reception desk holding a coffee cup. Dark navy coat today. Sharp jawline. Calm expression. He looked less tired in daylight. More dangerous somehow. Claire blinked in surprise. Oh, brilliant response. Truly. One side of his mouth curved faintly. Long night. You have no idea. He glanced at the folders slipping from her arms and took two without asking. Careful, he said quietly. Looks heavy. Claire let out a tired laugh. That is because I am carrying an entire gala on $27 and no sleep. He actually smiled at that. A real smile this time. Warm enough to completely change his face for one impossible second. Claire felt her breath catch unexpectedly. Then the elevator doors opened behind them, and two executives stepped out abruptly. The second they noticed the man beside her, both straightened instantly. Good morning, Mr. Cole. Claire's stomach dropped so fast she thought she might actually faint. Mr. Cole. Cole. Her eyes lifted slowly toward him as realization crashed through her chest all at once. Nathaniel Cole, Chief Executive Officer of Cole Meridian Group, the billionaire owner of the entire building. The man Forbes magazine called the most untouchable executive in Manhattan. And Claire had spent last night accidentally insulting rich people to his face. Claire forgot how to breathe for exactly 3 seconds. The lobby noise faded into a dull blur around her, while the words repeated inside her head. Mr. Cole, Nathaniel Cole. The man standing inches away from her was not some late-night executive wandering through the office. He was the executive, the owner, the billionaire whose name sat across the entire glass tower in silver letters 30 stories high. The same man she had basically accused of running empty charity performances 12 hours earlier. Heat rushed into her face so quickly she wanted the marble floor to open beneath her and swallow her whole. Nathaniel watched her carefully, almost like he could see the exact moment panic arrived. You look terrified, he said calmly. Claire opened her mouth, closed it again. A wonderful start. I did not realize that I sign your paychecks, he finished softly. Claire nearly dropped the folders still in her arms. Oh my God. One of the executives standing nearby shifted awkwardly, pretending not to listen while clearly listening to every word. Nathaniel took the folders from Claire before they slipped completely. Walk with me, he said simply. The statement was not loud, but everyone around them reacted instantly. Receptionists straightened. Security guards glanced up. Executives moved aside as Nathaniel Cole crossed the lobby beside a woman most employees barely noticed. Claire could feel eyes following them all the way to the private elevator. "Mr. Cole, I really am sorry about last night," she said quickly once the elevator doors closed behind them. "I was exhausted and completely inappropriate, and honestly, I probably should not have said any of that." Nathaniel leaned lightly against the elevator rail. "What?" Claire blinked. "Why what? Why should you not have said it?" The elevator rose smoothly toward the executive floors while soft instrumental music played overhead. Claire suddenly became painfully aware of everything about herself. Drugstore mascara, cheap flats damp from rain, coffee stain near the sleeve of her coat she had not noticed earlier. Nathaniel Cole looked like the kind of man who belonged on magazine covers beside private jets. She looked like she needed 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep and a miracle. "Because you are my boss," she answered quietly. That is usually when people stop telling the truth. Something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. The elevator opened onto the executive floor. Dark wood, quiet hallways, artwork worth more than her apartment building. Claire followed Nathaniel carefully, trying not to stare while assistants and executives greeted him with immediate tension in their posture. Everyone here seemed afraid of disappointing him. Strangely, Nathaniel himself did not seem intimidating right now, just thoughtful. He stopped outside a glass conference room, overlooking Manhattan. Morning light spilled across polished floors while the skyline stretched endlessly behind him. "Tell me something honestly, Claire." Her name sounded different in his voice, softer than she expected. "Do you know who designed the original Whitmore Foundation outreach proposal?" Claire hesitated. Margaret presented it. "That was not my question." Silence settled heavily between them. Claire looked down at the folders in her arms. "I helped with some of it," she admitted carefully. Nathaniel studied her face for several long seconds. Then he walked toward the conference table and placed a thin black file in front of her. "Open it." Claire slowly obeyed. Inside were copies of campaign drafts. Her drafts, her formatting notes, her handwritten edits scanned digitally into the margins. Her chest tightened immediately. "Where did you get these?" "From the internal archive." Nathaniel folded his arms calmly. "Every file uploaded into this company leaves a timestamp." Claire stared at the pages in disbelief. Dates, revision history, metadata. Every concept Margaret claimed as her own led directly back to Claire Whitman. Nathaniel watched her expression carefully. "You built almost 70% of the Whitmore campaign." Claire swallowed hard. "It was a team effort." "No," Nathaniel replied quietly. "It was your effort." She did not know what to say to that. Nobody had ever said those words before. Not here, not anywhere in years. Nathaniel stepped closer to the window overlooking the city. "Do you know why I stayed last night after everyone left?" Claire shook her head slowly. "Because for the first time in months, someone in this building spoke to me like a human being instead of a headline." His reflection moved faintly across the glass skyline. "Most people see money first. You saw a problem." Claire looked down awkwardly. "I was probably still insulting you." "You were." To her surprise, his mouth curved faintly again. Then his expression shifted serious. "Come with me to the gala." Claire froze. "What?" "Not as Margaret Sloane's assistant." Nathaniel's voice remained calm and precise. "As my guest." The room suddenly felt too quiet. Claire stared at him, certain she misunderstood. "Mr. Cole, Nathaniel." "Nathaniel," she corrected nervously. "I think you are forgetting who I am." "No," he said softly. "I think everyone else has." Claire looked away first because something about the way he said that felt dangerous in a completely different way. Not because he was rich, not because he was powerful, because he looked at her like she mattered. And that was far more terrifying. "People like me do not belong at events like that," she whispered. Nathaniel stepped closer to the table and rested one hand lightly against the black Gala file. "Claire," he said quietly, "the people who belong in those rooms are usually the ones least worthy of being there." She let out a nervous laugh despite herself. "That sounds like something a billionaire says after reading philosophy at 3 in the morning." He smiled fully this time. Warm, real, unexpectedly handsome. Probably. Claire hated how much that smile affected her immediately. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, executives hurried through hallways carrying tablets and coffee while billion-dollar decisions moved through the building every minute. Yet somehow the entire world felt still inside this room. Nathaniel's gaze lowered briefly toward the edge of her folder, where a folded paper corner stuck out slightly. A sketch page. Claire reacted instantly and pulled it back against her chest. Too late. He had already seen enough. White pencil lines. Silver detailing. A dress design. Nathaniel looked back at her slowly. You designed it yourself? Claire's fingers tightened around the paper. Years ago. He held her gaze for one quiet second longer than necessary. Wear it to the gala. Claire spent the rest of the morning pretending her entire life had not tilted sideways inside a glass conference room 40 floors above Manhattan. Unfortunately, pretending became difficult the moment Nathaniel Cole personally walked her back through the executive floor. Every assistant they passed looked startled. Every executive suddenly became fascinated with their tablets. By the time Claire reached the marketing department again, the atmosphere had changed. Completely. Conversations stopped when she walked by. Margaret Sloan noticed immediately. Of course she did. Margaret noticed weakness the way sharks notice blood in water. Claire, she called sharply from her office doorway. Now. Claire stepped inside, carefully, while floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the pale winter sky behind Margaret's desk. Did you need something? Margaret folded her arms. Why were you upstairs with Nathaniel Cole? Direct. Cold. Dangerous. Claire kept her expression neutral. He asked about the Whitmore campaign. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. And I answered his questions. Margaret leaned back slowly in her chair. Let me give you some professional advice, Claire. Her voice softened in a way that felt worse somehow. Men like Nathaniel Cole do not notice women like us unless they need something. Claire almost corrected her. Women like us? Margaret lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park and carried handbags that cost more than Claire's yearly grocery budget. But Claire stayed silent. Understand, she said quietly. Margaret watched her another moment before sliding a thick binder across the desk. Good. Then you can finish revising the donor seating chart before tonight. Claire blinked. Tonight, the gala rehearsal dinner. Margaret smiled thinly. Surely Mr. Cole did not forget to mention that. Claire walked out carrying the binder with her pulse hammering far too fast. Rehearsal dinner. Gala. Nathaniel's guest. The word still felt unreal. She spent the next 6 hours buried in schedules, catering adjustments, guest conflicts, and seating politics between billionaires who apparently considered table placement a matter of national security. By 7:15 that evening, the office had emptied again except for a handful of exhausted event staff. Claire rubbed her eyes and finally shut down her computer. The second she stepped into the elevator lobby, she froze. Nathaniel stood waiting beside the private elevator with one hand in his coat pocket. Dark charcoal suit tonight. No dia? Snow had started falling lightly outside the glass windows behind him. He looked unfairly composed for a man responsible for an empire worth billions. Claire glanced around instinctively. You're still here? I could ask you the same thing. Some of us cannot leave until the billionaire charity kingdom survives another spreadsheet crisis. Nathaniel smiled faintly. Come have dinner with me. Claire nearly choked on air. Excuse me? Relax, he said calmly while pressing the elevator button. I mean actual dinner. Food. Conversation. Nothing scandalous. The elevator doors opened. Claire hesitated only 2 seconds before stepping inside. She honestly was not sure what frightened her more anymore. Nathaniel himself, or how quickly she stopped wanting to say no to him. 20 minutes later, they sat inside a quiet Italian restaurant in Tribeca, hidden behind dark wood doors and warm candlelight. Nobody stared at Nathaniel here. Nobody rushed toward the table asking for photos or signatures. The hostess greeted him by name without surprise, which somehow told Claire this was one of the few places in Manhattan where he came to breathe like a normal person. Claire wrapped both hands around a mug of hot tea while snow drifted softly outside the windows. I still think this is a terrible idea, she admitted quietly. Nathaniel looked up from the menu. Dinner. The gala. She exhaled slowly. People like Margaret spend their entire lives making sure women like me understand exactly where we belong. And where is that? Claire laughed softly without humor. Definitely not standing beside you in front of 500 cameras. Nathaniel rested his fork down carefully. You know what I think? That sounds dangerous. I think Margaret Sloane invited you expecting embarrassment. His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath now. And I think the idea of you walking into that ballroom without apologizing for existing terrifies people like her. Claire looked down at the tea, swirling gently in her cup. Nobody had ever defended her like this before. Not without wanting something in return. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Nathaniel answered immediately. Because your work deserves your name on it. The simplicity of the answer hit harder than anything dramatic could have. Claire swallowed carefully. You barely know me. I know enough. Silence settled between them while soft jazz played somewhere near the back of the restaurant. Claire studied him carefully for the first time without panic clouding everything. Nathaniel Cole was handsome, yes. Any magazine cover could confirm that. But the real thing people noticed about him was control. Every movement precise. Every expression measured. Yet tonight, sitting across from her beneath soft amber light, he looked tired in a way expensive suits could not hide. Lonely, maybe. The thought surprised her. Nathaniel reached into the inside pocket of his coat and placed a slim black card on the table between them. What is this? Claire asked. Access authorization for the gala preparation suite tomorrow. She stared at the card. Nathaniel, no stylists if you do not want them. No makeover circus. No pretending to be someone else. His eyes held her steadily. But let me help you walk into that room the way you deserve to. Claire's fingers brushed the black card carefully. Expensive cardstock. Silver lettering. Strange how different this invitation felt from Margaret's envelope. One designed to humiliate. The other designed to restore something she had almost forgotten she lost. Nathaniel leaned back slightly. One condition. Claire looked up warily. What condition? A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Where the dress you sketched. Her breath caught softly. It is unfinished. Then finish it. Snow continued, falling quietly outside, while Manhattan glowed silver beyond the windows. And for the first time in years, Claire felt something dangerous begin unfolding slowly inside her chest. Not fantasy, not rescue, something even riskier. Hope. Claire had not touched her sketchbook in almost 3 years. Yet somehow, at 2:15 in the morning, she sat cross-legged on her apartment floor with fabric spread around her like fragments of a life she used to recognize. The tiny living room glowed under one weak lamp, while old jazz played softly from her phone beside a pile of silver thread. Her mother slept behind the curtain divider, and outside, snow drifted silently past. The windows of Queens, like the city itself, had finally slowed down long enough to breathe. Claire stared at the dress sketch lying open across her knees. White satin, silver detailing along one side. Elegant but sharp. Not soft. Not delicate. Strong. She remembered designing it during a lecture while everyone else took notes about market trends and luxury branding. Back then, the dress had meant ambition. Tonight, it meant something else entirely. Survival. You are really doing this, she whispered to herself. The thought sounded insane out loud. Claire Whitman. Assistant. Invisible girl in discount sweaters. Walking into the Whitmore Winter Gala beside Nathaniel Cole. She almost laughed again. Instead, she reached for the scissors. The next 24 hours blurred together in exhaustion and adrenaline. During the day, she handled seating disasters, donor requests, and Margaret Sloane's impossible demands while pretending her pulse did not spike every time someone mentioned the gala. During lunch breaks, she secretly ordered missing fabric online with money she absolutely should not have spent. At night, she sewed until her fingers cramped and silver thread tangled around her wrists like tiny strands of moonlight. By Friday evening, her apartment looked like a small storm of fabric, sketches, coffee cups, and panic. Claire stood in front of the mirror, holding the unfinished gown against herself while trying not to cry from frustration. The neckline is wrong, she muttered. Everything is wrong. No, her mother's voice said softly behind her. You are just scared. Claire turned. Diane Whitman stood near the kitchen wrapped in a blanket, watching her daughter with tired but knowing eyes. Claire immediately set the dress down. You should be resting. And miss seeing this? Diane smiled gently. Absolutely not. Claire looked away, toward the mirror again. I cannot go there looking ridiculous. Her mother stepped closer slowly. Sweetheart, do you know what the saddest thing about fear is? Claire crossed her arms. That it exists. Diane laughed quietly. No, it convinces beautiful people they need permission to be seen. Claire swallowed hard before. Speaking again, what if they laugh at me? Her mother's expression softened immediately because she knew exactly who they meant. Rich people, executives, women like Margaret Sloan. Entire rooms trained to notice flaws before humanity. Diane reached out carefully and touched the silver fabric hanging from Claire's hands. Then let them. Claire looked up. You made this with your own hands, Diane continued softly. Nobody can laugh at that without revealing something ugly about themselves. Silence settled gently between them. Then Diane smiled faintly. Also, for the record, Margaret Sloan has the emotional warmth of airport carpeting. Claire burst into laughter so suddenly she nearly startled herself. It felt good, real, necessary. 2 hours later, Claire finally stitched the final silver seam into place. She stepped back slowly from the mirror once the dress rested fully against her body for the first time. White silk curved elegantly without trying too hard. Silver detailing caught the apartment light like liquid frost running down one side. Clean lines, sharp shoulders, powerful, not designed to beg for attention, designed to survive it. Claire stared at her reflection in complete silence. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about revenge. Revenge screamed. This felt quieter than that, more dangerous. Like remembering who she used to be before the world convinced her smallness was safer. Her phone buzzed across the couch. Nathaniel, car arrives tomorrow at 6:30. Claire looked at the message longer than necessary before typing back carefully. Claire, I still think this is a terrible idea. 3 dots appeared immediately. Nathaniel, good. The best decisions usually are. Another message followed. Nathaniel, and Claire? She hesitated before opening it. Nathaniel, do not let anyone in that ballroom make you feel temporary. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. She locked the phone quickly before she could overthink why those words affected her so much. Saturday arrived wrapped in pale winter sunlight and nervous energy. By 4 o'clock, the gala preparation suite inside the Whitmore Hotel buzzed with stylists, assistants, makeup artists, and security teams preparing Manhattan's wealthiest families for one perfect evening of public generosity. Claire stepped out of the elevator, clutching her garment bag tightly against her chest. Heads turned immediately, not because she looked glamorous yet, because she looked ordinary. One exhausted assistant carrying her own dress, while billionaires upstairs expected perfection delivered professionally. A woman near the styling station approached quickly. Miss Whitman, we have 3 couture options prepared for you from Milan. Claire blinked. 3 what? Mr. Cole requested fittings yesterday. The woman gestured toward racks of designer gowns sparkling beneath soft lights. Claire stared at them for one silent moment. Thousands of dollars in fabric and diamonds and impossible tailoring. Any one of them could transform her instantly into the kind of woman these rooms respected automatically. Slowly, Claire shook her head. Thank you, she said softly, but I already brought my dress. The stylist looked confused. Miss Whitman, these are custom designer pieces. Claire tightened her grip on the garment bag gently. So is mine. Behind her, another elevator opened quietly. Nathaniel Cole stepped into the preparation suite, wearing a black tuxedo, so perfectly tailored it looked almost unreal against the gold hotel lighting. Conversations shifted instantly around him. Assistants straightened. Staff moved faster. Yet Nathaniel's eyes found Claire immediately across the crowded room. Then his gaze lowered toward the garment bag in her hands. A slow smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. And somehow, without seeing the dress yet, he already looked proud of her. The Whitmore Ballroom looked like something built for people who had never once checked a bank account before buying groceries. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light across marble floors, while an orchestra played near towering white floral arrangements taller than Claire herself. Servers moved through the room, carrying champagne beneath ceilings painted with soft clouds and gold trim. Everywhere she looked, wealth shimmered. Diamonds, silk, watches that probably cost more than her mother's medical treatments for the next 10 years. Claire stood behind the closed ballroom doors, trying very hard not to panic. "You are breathing too fast." Nathaniel's voice came softly beside her. Claire glanced toward him nervously. "I'm about to walk into a room full of people who could buy my apartment building for fun." Nathaniel adjusted one cuff calmly. "Most of them are deeply unimpressive once they start talking." Claire laughed despite herself, and she looked down at her hands. "I still have time to fake food poisoning." "Absolutely not." His voice carried quiet amusement now. "You spent 3 days sewing silver thread into a masterpiece. You're going inside." Claire swallowed hard. The white gown fit perfectly now beneath the warm hotel lighting. Silver details curved along the fabric like frozen light, elegant without trying too hard. She wore no diamonds except small pearl earrings that belonged to her grandmother. Her hair rested softly over one shoulder in loose waves. She styled herself 30 minutes earlier after refusing 3 different celebrity stylists. Simple, clean, honest. Nathaniel looked at her for one long, quiet second before speaking again. "You know what the problem is?" Claire blinked. "There are multiple problems." No, his eyes held her steadily. "The problem is that you have absolutely no idea what you look like tonight." Her breath caught embarrassingly fast. Before she could answer, the ballroom coordinator approached quickly. "Mr. Cole, they are ready for your entrance." Nathaniel nodded once. Then he extended his arm toward Claire. Not rushed, not performative, gentle, deliberate. Claire stared at his arm for half a heartbeat before slipping her hand lightly against his sleeve. Warm, solid, safe. The ballroom doors opened. Sound flooded outward immediately. Music, laughter, crystal glasses clinking beneath chandeliers. Then the announcer's voice carried across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Executive Officer Nathaniel Cole." Hundreds of heads turned instantly toward the entrance. Claire almost stepped backward from instinct alone. Then Nathaniel leaned slightly closer beside her. "Do not shrink," he murmured quietly. "Not for them." Together, they walked into the ballroom. The effect was immediate. Conversation slowed. Smiles paused halfway. Even the orchestra seemed quieter for one strange, suspended moment. Claire felt the attention hit her like heat across skin. Men looked up from business conversations. Women glanced toward her gown, then toward Nathaniel, trying to place her instantly within Manhattan's invisible social hierarchy. But they could not, because Claire Whitman did not belong to their world. And, somehow tonight, she looked completely impossible to ignore inside it. Nathaniel guided her calmly through the ballroom, while whispers spread quietly behind them. "Who is she? Is that Nathaniel Cole's girlfriend? I thought Margaret Sloan was coordinating tonight." Claire kept her posture steady, even though her pulse hammered violently beneath the silver fabric. Across the room, Margaret Sloan stood beside a group of investors, holding a champagne glass mid-conversation. The second she saw Claire, all color disappeared from her face. It happened so fast Claire almost missed it. Shock first, then confusion, then something darker. Fear. Margaret's eyes traveled slowly over the white gown, the silver detailing. Nathaniel's hand lightly resting near Claire's back. The realization hit her visibly all at once. Claire had not arrived humiliated. She had arrived untouchable. "Well," Nathaniel said quietly beside her, that reaction alone was worth attending. Claire nearly smiled. Nearly. Margaret recovered quickly, of course. Women like Margaret built entire careers from recovering quickly. She crossed the ballroom gracefully, diamonds flashing beneath chandelier light, while several executives followed close behind her. "Nathaniel," she said smoothly once she reached them. "You made it." Her smile toward Claire looked almost painful now. Claire, you look different. Claire met her gaze evenly. Thank you. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly because she heard the confidence hidden underneath the calm reply. Nathaniel accepted 2 champagne glasses from a passing server and handed one to Claire without taking his eyes off Margaret. The donor presentation tonight was revised, he said casually. Claire helped improve several sections. Margaret's fingers tightened subtly around her glass. How wonderful. Actually, Nathaniel continued calmly, essential. Claire almost turned to stare at him. Margaret noticed that too. The room around them buzzed softly with curiosity now. Powerful people sense tension faster than ordinary people sensed weather changes. Nathaniel. Another voice interrupted smoothly nearby. A tall, silver-haired man approached wearing a dark tuxedo and practiced political charm. Preston Valley. Venture capitalist. Public donor. One of Margaret's favorite investors. You have been impossible to reach this week, Preston said before finally noticing Claire. His gaze paused briefly, evaluating, interested. And who is this? Before Claire could answer, Nathaniel spoke first. Claire Whitman. His voice remained calm, certain. The creative mind behind tonight's foundation strategy. Silence. Tiny but noticeable. Margaret's expression froze almost imperceptibly. Preston blinked once. Interesting, he said slowly. Claire understood the word for what it really meant. Unexpected. Inconvenient. Dangerous. Around them, whispers spread further through the ballroom while cameras flashed near the stage entrance. Claire suddenly realized something important. The room was no longer laughing at her. The room was watching her. And somehow, that terrified Margaret Sloane far more. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as the orchestra softened into elegant background music near the stage. Waiters moved between tables refilling crystal glasses, while Manhattan's wealthiest donors settled into velvet chairs beneath towering arrangements of white roses. Claire sat beside Nathaniel at the front table, trying very hard not to look overwhelmed by any of it. Unfortunately, that became impossible the moment she noticed Margaret Sloane whispering urgently with Preston Vale across the room. Nathaniel followed her gaze calmly. That expression usually means trouble. Claire exhaled softly. I think Margaret would rather set herself on fire than watch me survive tonight. Nathaniel's mouth curved faintly. Good thing survival looks excellent on you. Claire looked away too quickly before he noticed the effect those words had on her. A server approached with the first dinner course, while camera crews repositioned near the stage for the foundation presentation. Around them, conversations flowed through the ballroom in polished waves. Stock markets, political donations, ski properties in Aspen, charity spoken about like a luxury accessory. Claire quietly observed everything while silver candlelight reflected against her gown. Then she heard it. Nathaniel always did enjoy surprises. Preston Vale's voice slid smoothly into the space beside their table. Margaret stood next to him now, wearing a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Claire, Margaret added sweetly, you truly transformed tonight. It is inspiring what confidence can do. Claire set down her water glass carefully. Kindness helps too. Nathaniel glanced sideways toward her, almost amused. Margaret ignored the remark completely. Actually, she continued, raising her voice just enough for nearby tables to hear, I was just telling Preston how proud I am to mentor young women in this company. Claire nearly laughed out loud at the word mentor. Preston studied Claire thoughtfully. Margaret tells me you were an administrative assistant before this sudden promotion. There it was. The real attack finally arriving beneath expensive smiles. Claire met his gaze evenly. I still am. Preston tilted his head slightly. That must make tonight overwhelming. Nathaniel's expression cooled immediately, but Claire answered first. Only if someone confuses wealth with importance. Silence flickered briefly across the table. Margaret smiled tightly. Claire has always had strong opinions. That is because nobody else likes saying the uncomfortable parts out loud, Claire replied softly. Preston chuckled once without warmth. Careful. New York punishes honesty faster than failure. Then it is lucky I am already failing publicly, Claire answered. Nathaniel lowered his champagne glass slowly, watching her with unmistakable admiration now. Margaret noticed, and that seemed to irritate her more than anything else tonight. Before she could respond, the ballroom host stepped onto the stage beneath a wash of golden light. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening in support of the Whitmore Foundation Initiative. Applause rolled softly through the room. Giant projection screens illuminated behind the stage, displaying the campaign visuals Claire had spent months secretly building. Her chest tightened, painfully watching them appear 40 feet high beneath crystal chandeliers, while Margaret accepted quiet praise from nearby investors. Tonight, the host continued, we celebrate innovation, outreach, and the future of community recovery programs across New York City. The presentation began. Claire watched in silence while Margaret's polished narration filled the ballroom. Every word sounded familiar because most of them belonged to Claire originally. Her research, her strategy, her language. The foundation believes dignity begins with visibility, Margaret announced smoothly on stage. Claire nearly flinched hearing the line. She wrote that sentence at 3 in the morning beside her mother's hospital bed. Nathaniel noticed immediately. That was yours, he said quietly. Not question. Claire looked down at her hands. It does not matter. Yes, Nathaniel replied softly. It does. On stage, Margaret continued accepting admiration effortlessly while Preston watched from the front table with satisfied approval. Then the final campaign slide appeared behind her. A closing mission statement Claire had written months ago after riding the subway home beside a homeless woman trying to warm her hands around a paper coffee cup. No human being deserves to feel invisible. The ballroom applauded warmly. Margaret smiled graciously beneath the lights. Then Nathaniel stood. The movement alone shifted the atmosphere instantly. Conversation stopped. Cameras turned. Margaret's expression flickered uncertainly as Nathaniel calmly buttoned his tuxedo jacket and stepped toward the stage microphone. Before we conclude tonight's presentation, he said smoothly, there is someone this room deserves to acknowledge properly. Claire's pulse spiked violently. Margaret froze beside the podium. Nathaniel looked directly toward the projection screen technician near the back wall. Display Revision History Archive. The ballroom murmured in confusion. Suddenly the giant screens changed. Campaign drafts appeared one after another beside timestamps, edit histories, and creator data. Claire Whitman, Claire Whitman, Claire Whitman. Every major concept attached unmistakably to her name. Silence crashed across the ballroom all at once. Margaret's face drained completely of color beneath the stage lights. Preston straightened sharply in his chair. Nathaniel's voice remained calm, controlled, deadly precise. It appears the majority of this campaign was not created by Margaret Sloan. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Camera flashes exploded across the ballroom now, while executives exchanged stunned looks around the tables. Claire sat frozen beside her untouched champagne glass, unable to process what was happening. Nathaniel turned slowly toward the audience. The Whitmore Initiative exists because one employee inside this company understood something the rest of us forgot. His gaze found Claire immediately across the ballroom. That dignity is not charity. It is humanity. The room followed his eyes toward her all at once. Hundreds of people staring now, not dismissively, not mockingly, shocked, respectful. Margaret stepped forward abruptly toward the microphone. Nathaniel, this is highly inappropriate. No, Nathaniel interrupted quietly. What was inappropriate was stealing someone else's voice because you assumed nobody important would notice. The silence afterward felt enormous. Margaret stood completely still beneath the chandeliers while years of carefully constructed authority cracked visibly around her in front of everyone she spent her life trying to impress. And Claire realized suddenly that revenge did not feel loud the way she expected. It felt terrifyingly quiet, like finally refusing to disappear. For one suspended moment, nobody inside the Whitmore ballroom seemed capable of movement. Crystal chandeliers glowed above frozen expressions while Claire sat perfectly still beneath hundreds of staring eyes. The giant projection screens still displayed her name beside campaign drafts. Margaret Sloan had claimed as her own for months. Claire Whitman, repeated again and again across revision histories and timestamps impossible to deny. Somewhere near the back of the ballroom, a camera shutter clicked sharply. Then another. Then dozens more exploded at once. Margaret recovered first. Of course she did. Women like Margaret Sloan survived by adapting faster than everyone around them. She stepped toward Nathaniel with controlled fury, hidden behind a polished smile. "This is absurd," she said smoothly into the microphone. "Collaborative projects involve many contributors. Surely we are not publicly humiliating employees over formatting credits." Nathaniel looked at her calmly. "Formatting credits?" The ballroom shifted uneasily. Preston Vale stood slowly from his chair now, sensing the social tide changing direction in real time. "Nathaniel," he interrupted carefully, "perhaps this conversation belongs in a boardroom instead of a charity event." "Interesting," Nathaniel replied softly. "Because nobody objected when Claire Whitman's work was displayed publicly under someone else's name." Silence crashed down again. Margaret's composure flickered visibly this time. "You are overreacting." Nathaniel's gaze never moved from hers. "No, I am correcting something." Claire's pulse hammered violently beneath the silver fabric of her gown. Part of her wanted to disappear completely. Another part felt something strange unfolding quietly inside her chest. Relief. Years of shrinking herself. Years of apologizing for existing in rooms where nobody listened. And now the truth stood illuminated 40 feet high behind her, while Manhattan's most powerful people watched it happen in complete silence. Margaret turned suddenly toward Claire. "You knew about this?" Her voice sharpened now beneath the polished exterior. "You planned this entire spectacle?" Claire slowly rose from her chair. The ballroom watched her immediately. She could feel it. Wealthy donors, executives, politicians, cameras. An entire room waiting to see whether she would finally become exactly what Margaret always believed she was. Small, emotional, grateful for scraps. Instead, Claire smoothed one, hand lightly against the silver detailing of her gown, and answered quietly. "No." Her voice carried clearly across the ballroom without needing force. "I came here because I was invited." Margaret laughed once without humor. "Do not pretend innocence now." Claire met her gaze steadily. "I'm not pretending anything anymore." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Even Preston Vale looked unsettled now. Nathaniel remained silent beside the stage, watching Claire carefully like he already understood she did not need rescuing anymore. Margaret stepped closer. "You think one dress and one speech suddenly make you important?" Claire's expression softened unexpectedly. Not angry. Not cruel. Sad. "No," she answered gently. "I think people were important long before rooms like this decided to notice them." A quiet murmur spread through the ballroom. Someone near the donor tables actually started clapping softly before stopping awkwardly. Margaret's face tightened further. "You are making a mistake." Claire shook her head slowly. "No, the mistake was believing I needed your permission to matter." The silence afterward felt enormous. Nathaniel lowered his eyes briefly, like the words affected him more than he expected. Then he stepped toward the microphone one final time. "Effective immediately," he announced calmly. "Margaret Sloan is relieved of all executive responsibilities within Cole Meridian Group pending a formal ethics review." Gasps rippled visibly across the ballroom. Margaret stared at him in complete disbelief. "You cannot be serious." "Completely." Nathaniel's voice never rose. That somehow made it more devastating. Preston Vale stepped backward immediately, distancing himself without a second thought. The same investors who admired Margaret 30 minutes earlier now avoided eye contact entirely. Claire watched it happen with quiet disbelief. Power moved differently in rooms like this. Fussed, cold, survival disguised as sophistication. Margaret looked around desperately at faces that once adored her. Nobody moved. Nobody defended her. Nathaniel turned toward Claire again. "There's one more thing." Claire blinked softly. Nathaniel gestured toward. the giant screens behind them. The campaign visuals shifted suddenly. New text appeared beneath the Whitmore Foundation logo. Creative Director, Claire Whitman. The ballroom erupted into applause before Claire could even process it. Real applause this time. Loud, unavoidable. She stood frozen beneath crystal light while strangers rose to their feet around the room. Some clapped because they respected talent. Others because powerful people had decided respecting her was now socially correct. Claire understood the difference instantly. But strangely, it no longer mattered. Nathaniel stepped down from the stage and crossed the ballroom toward her while applause still echoed through the room. "You all right?" he asked quietly once he reached her. Claire looked up at him with shining eyes she refused to let cry publicly. "I do not think my nervous system survived tonight." Nathaniel laughed softly for the first time all evening. Warm, genuine, human. Probably not. Claire glanced around the ballroom once more. Wealth, cameras, chandeliers. The exact room she feared would destroy her. Instead, it revealed something else entirely. She had spent years believing confidence belonged only to people born into privilege. But confidence was not wealth. Confidence was finally deciding your existence did not require approval. Nathaniel extended his hand toward her quietly. "Come outside with me." Claire looked at his hand for one brief second before taking it. Together, they walked toward the balcony doors while applause slowly faded behind them. Snow drifted softly across Manhattan beyond the glass skyline. Cold winter air wrapped around them the second they stepped onto the rooftop terrace overlooking the city lights below. Claire exhaled shakily and leaned against the railing. "You know what is strange?" she said softly. Nathaniel stood beside her. "What?" Claire looked out over New York, glowing silver beneath falling snow. "I thought revenge would feel louder than this." Nathaniel watched her carefully for a moment before answering. "Maybe real revenge is just becoming someone nobody can erase anymore." And standing there beneath the winter skyline in the gown she created. With her own hands, Claire realized he was right. 3 months later, Snow returned to Manhattan like the city was trying to remember the night everything changed. But this time, Claire Whitman no longer entered Meridian Tower with her shoulders curved inward or her eyes fixed carefully on the floor. Now, people looked up when she walked through the lobby, not because Nathaniel Cole stood beside her, because her name carried weight on its own. The creative director office on the 36th floor still smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee when Claire unlocked the glass door early Monday morning. Her office overlooked the East River now. Clean white walls, long fabric tables, sketches pinned beside campaign boards. Her old leather sketchbook rested near the window, exactly where sunlight touched it every morning. Sometimes she still stared at the room in disbelief, especially on difficult days, especially when fear whispered this life still belonged to someone else. But then she would remember the ballroom, the screens, the silence before applause, and most importantly, the version of herself who stopped apologizing for existing. "You're here early again." Nathaniel's voice drifted softly from the doorway behind her. Claire smiled before turning around. "Some of us actually work for a living, Mr. Cole." Nathaniel stepped inside, carrying 2 coffees despite technically owning an entire building filled with assistants whose sole purpose was probably coffee management. Dark winter coat, snowflakes melting slowly against broad shoulders. Still unfairly handsome. "Unfortunately, I bring peace offerings now because apparently my creative director becomes terrifying without caffeine." Claire accepted the coffee carefully. Smart decision. Nathaniel looked around the office quietly. His gaze paused on the framed silver sketch hanging beside the window. The original gown design. Claire had almost thrown the sketch away years ago. Now it hung inside a floating glass frame with a small silver plaque underneath. Designed before she remembered her worth. Nathaniel walked closer to it slowly. "You know," he said softly, "the board still talks about that dress." Claire laughed lightly. "The board needs hobbies. The board is terrified of you." "Good." Nathaniel smiled at that. Real smiles came easier now. Claire noticed it weeks ago during late meetings and quiet dinners and impossible conversations that somehow lasted until midnight without either of them realizing. Somewhere between rooftop confessions and morning coffee runs and campaign planning sessions, Nathaniel Cole stopped feeling untouchable. He started feeling human. One evening, he admitted he had not eaten dinner with another person in almost 6 months before meeting her. Another night, Claire confessed she used to practice sounding confident alone in the subway bathroom mirror before presentations. They learn each other slowly, carefully, like two people unlearning loneliness in different languages. Claire stepped toward the office windows overlooking Manhattan, glowing silver beneath fresh snow. "My mother asked about you again yesterday," she said lightly. Nathaniel leaned beside her near the glass. "Should I be concerned?" "Very." Claire smiled into her coffee cup. "She likes you more than me now." Nathaniel pretended to consider that seriously. "Reasonable." Claire laughed softly and looked out over the skyline. 3 months ago, this city felt enormous and cold and impossible to survive. Now it looked different somehow. Still loud, still exhausting, but no longer designed entirely for other people. Nathaniel studied her quietly beside the window. "There is something I need to show you tonight." Claire glanced sideways. "That sounds suspiciously dramatic." It is New York in December. Everything is dramatic. By 7:30 that evening, snow covered Fifth Avenue in soft white layers while Christmas lights reflected against wet sidewalks beneath the cold night air. Nathaniel drove them through Midtown himself instead of using a driver, which Claire secretly loved because it made him seem less like a billionaire headline and more like a man who stole fries from her plate when he thought she was not looking. "Where are we going?" she asked again as the car turned onto a quieter street near Soho. "Patience." "That is not an answer." "Correct." 10 minutes later, Nathaniel parked beside a renovated brick building glowing warmly against the snowy sidewalk. Claire frowned slightly while stepping out of the car. "What is this?" Nathaniel only gestured toward the entrance. Inside, warm golden lights spilled across polished hardwood floors and tall, white gallery walls. Claire froze the second she walked farther into the room. Her sketches, everywhere, fashion drawings, campaign concepts, fabric designs. The silver gown displayed at the center beneath soft floating lights like artwork instead of survival. Claire stared speechlessly while footsteps echoed softly behind her. "Nathaniel." He stood beside her quietly. "I bought the building last month." Claire turned toward him slowly. "You bought an entire gallery?" "Technically, yes. That is an insane person activity." "Probably." His eyes held her steadily now. "Warm. Certain. But I wanted you to have a place where nobody could ever erase your name again." Claire felt emotion rise so suddenly she had to look away toward the glowing gallery walls before it overwhelmed her completely. Near the center display sat something small beneath glass. The original black gala invitation Margaret Sloan threw across her desk months ago. Beside it rested a handwritten card. "This time, come because you are loved." Claire's breath caught sharply. She looked back toward Nathaniel just as he stepped closer and reached carefully into his coat pocket. "You once told me confidence felt like permission," he said softly. "But Claire, you never needed permission for any of this. Not your talent, not your voice, not your place beside me." Snow drifted quietly outside the gallery windows while Manhattan glowed gold beyond the glass. Nathaniel opened the small velvet box in his hand. Simple diamond ring. Elegant, honest, beautiful without trying too hard. Just like her. "I spent most of my life surrounded by people who admired power," he said quietly. "Then I met a woman who cared more about dignity than status. And somehow, she reminded me how to become human again." Claire covered her mouth softly, already crying despite promising herself she would not. Nathaniel smiled gently. "Claire Whitman, will you marry me?" For one impossible second, she saw every version of herself at once. The exhausted assistant eating vending machine dinners alone at midnight. The frightened girl hiding sketches beneath sweaters because dreams felt irresponsible. The woman standing frozen outside a ballroom, believing rich people decided who mattered. And then the version standing here now, beneath warm gallery lights with tears in her eyes and her whole future waiting in front of her. Claire laughed softly through tears and nodded immediately. Yes. Nathaniel slid the ring onto her finger carefully while snow continued falling outside the windows. Then he kissed her forehead gently beneath